This is Greg Troutwine. I'm the editor of Maritime Reporter and Engineering News. We're here on Maritime Reporter TV at the Shipping Insight 2016 with Frank Coles, CEO of Transas. Frank, thanks for joining us again.
Hi, Greg. Yeah, great to be here.
Okay. Frank, again, we appreciate your time. We just had a brief conversation. And of course, you're well known in this industry for many things. But when I say big data, smart data, what is that to you?
Big data, I'm not actually completely sure, but I think what it means to me is the collection of all of the sensor data that you can now get off the ship.
Okay.
For me, smart data is how we are going to sift through that data and get to a place where we can use it in a clever way for analytics, you know?
Okay. Again, there's a lot of talk about big data, smart data, the use of analytics, making operations more efficient, effective. Today, obviously, many ship owners are in a tight spot.
Sure.
Can you put in perspective for us the market reality versus the theory today?
Well, I think the market reality, when I look around, is it's mostly the vendors talking about it, and not the ship owners. It's also the class and people, because they recognize that somehow we need to be dragged kicking and screaming into the new millennium. Mm-hmm. But the condition of the market, and you only have to open the trade press every day to see the problems, is that this is going to happen a lot slower than perhaps we would all like it to happen.
Okay. We've talked about the market and the impetus for change many times, and you had some interesting thoughts on changing attitudes amongst the ship owning community. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, I think this all starts and finishes with attitude, actually. Okay. We talk about training, for instance, and people are required to go through regulated STCW training for using an ECTIS. Mm-hmm. But they get on board and the ECTIS is not really used, or you'll have a ship with dual ECTISes on board, maybe even electronic charts for the ECTISes. But the training, you read in the press all the time about the crew not being able to use it, but they're still doing paper noon reports. They're still doing, the master's still bogged down in a plethora of paperwork, when this should be automated. We need to change the attitude. And actually, when today's generation starts to get into ship owners, I think that is what's going to drive the change, because they just come from a different mindset.
Okay. Just picking up a little bit on the training, what is Transas doing in this regard? Or is Transas doing anything in this regard to try to forward the training?
From our perspective, we're trying to provide more opportunities for the various schools to share data, to share scenarios, to have online training. But we look to the schools, but not all the schools are well funded. And in fact, that's a thing that some ship owners and some of the large ship managers have recognized. So they've had to go out and create their own training schools as well. And of course, at the very top of the market, you've got the cruise liners who spend much more time on training because of their liability.
Absolutely. Again, you kind of just led beautifully into the next question. Obviously, the maritime market is very diverse. Sure. Running a bulk ship and running a cruise ship is not even close to being the same. When you look at the market in general, which niche do you feel is more evolved down the path of big data, smart data?
I consider the cruise industry more the hotel industry.
Okay.
And they run on ships and they have a very sophisticated marine department and technical department. But they also have a very sophisticated hotel department. So by nature, they gather huge amounts of data for analytics. So they're much more evolved from that perspective. If you look at the general commercial shipping, I think containers tend to lead the way because of the need to run on rail tracks and get from A to B, and they're part of a very large logistics chain. Okay. So I think they're the most evolved from the big data scenario.
Excellent. You're here today at Shipping Insight to discuss connectivity and cybersecurity.
Yeah.
You don't have to give me the full speech, but can you give me a brief on what you'll be discussing?
The nuts and bolts of it is, from my perspective, cybersecurity is simply smart IT processes, smart procedures, and the enforcement thereof. But it's a bigger threat, obviously, today because of more connectivity. Mm-hmm. And when we start to talk about big data, we reach the dichotomy where GMDSS, which is our safety connectivity, is heavily regulated, and compliance for the equipment is very strict. Yet our big data pipe, the communications, VSAT communications, is not heavily regulated. So I think we have a threat in cybersecurity from that perspective. Okay. But there's a number of other areas like AIS and the thumb drive and the human that also have questions to answer in terms of cybersecurity. Okay.
One final question. We discuss unmanned shipping a lot these days, it seems. Again, you talk about opening the trade press. I do the same thing. You can't throw a stick without it hitting unmanned shipping. You had an interesting thought on what you termed the greatest threat to unmanned shipping. Could you share your thoughts?
I think the greatest threat to unmanned shipping, in my perspective, is the whole positional data. Everything related to the ship and remote operations is where's the ship. Okay. And we're all using AIS, which was automatic identification system. But to me, it means attack, infiltrate, or spoof, because it's very easy to get into and hack. And here you are, these web services where you can track all of these ships is basically a window into world trade and a window for hackers to come in, and anybody who wants to do some serious damage only has to start with one of these services.
Okay, this is Greg Troutwine with Maritime Reporter TV, and we'd like to thank Frank Coles for joining us.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.